She only walked that way because she felt like she was going to break. Her hands were shaking after the call with her mother, and she needed space. Then she heard something that made her stop breathing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear. But it carried pain, and once she heard it, she could not turn back. Let me take you back to where it all began. My amazing friends and family, welcome back to Jenna's Velvet Tales. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe. Every subscription helps us share more emotional stories about the deep bonds between humans and animals. If this kind of story touches you, your support truly means a lot. Feel free to say where you're watching from, and don't forget to explore more beautiful stories here on the channel. Now back to the story. Lillian Reyes slowed her steps even though she did not know why. She had walked this path many times before, but never this far, and never alone with her thoughts like this. Her phone was still warm in her pocket from the call she had just ended. Her mother's voice kept replaying in her head. Not angry, not loud, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying worry for too long. Lillian pressed her fingers into her palm and told herself to breathe, because that was what she told others to do when panic crept in, yet it did not work as well on herself. She kept walking because stopping felt worse, and turning back felt like admitting she could not handle one more thing today. Then she heard it again. It was not clear enough to name, and that made it worse. It was not a voice she recognized, and not a sound she expected to hear here. It came from somewhere ahead, low and uneven, like something trying very hard not to be heard. Lillian stopped fully this time. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She listened, holding still because whatever made that sound felt fragile, and she did not want to scare it away. She took a few careful steps toward the old structure at the edge of the zone. She remembered when it had still been used, when people moved through here with purpose, when this place mattered. Now it felt forgotten, and that thought sat heavy in her chest because she knew what it felt like to be useful once and then quietly pushed aside. When she reached the opening, she crouched without thinking. Her knees pressed into the dirt, and she rested her weight forward, slow and steady. That was when she saw her. The dog did not rush or retreat. She stood where she was, body tense, eyes fixed on Lillian with a look that was not fear, but warning mixed with exhaustion. Her coat was dull, her sides moving too fast with each breath. Lillian had worked with animals before during joint drills, and something about the way this dog held herself made Lillian's stomach tighten. This dog knew commands. She knew rules. She had learned to wait. Behind her, pressed close, were two small shapes. One moved weakly, letting out a thin sound that barely rose above the quiet. The other lay still. Lillian swallowed and whispered, "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Her voice came out softer than she meant it to, like she was talking to a child who had already cried too much. The dog did not move, but her eyes followed Lillian's hands when she slowly set her pack down. Lillian kept her movements open and slow, because trust was not something you rushed, especially not with someone who had been left behind. She could see the ribs now, the way the dog's legs trembled slightly as she shifted her weight to shield the pups. Lillian felt something pull tight inside her chest, because she recognized that stance. She had seen it in people too, the kind of strength that shows up only when there is nothing left to give. "I'm a medic," Lillian said quietly. Even though she knew the dog could not understand the words, still it felt right to say it. "I help." She reached into her pack and took out a small bottle of water. She poured some into her palm and held it out, not too close. The dog's nose twitched, but she did not step forward. Instead, she lowered her head just enough to glance back at the pups, then lifted her eyes again. It was not a threat. It was a question. Lillian's throat tightened. "I see them," she said. "I see them." She shifted closer, inch by inch, stopping every time the dog's body stiffened. When she reached the pup that was not moving, she felt her heart sink. She touched its side with the back of her finger, gentle, careful. The pup was warm, but its breathing was wrong, shallow and uneven. Lillian did not think. She acted. She had learned long ago that thinking too much could cost time, and time was something this little life did not have. As she worked, she spoke softly, not just to the pup, but to the mother too. She told her what she was doing, told her she was not alone, told her she did not have to fight this moment by herself. And slowly, the dog did something that made Lillian's eyes sting. She stepped aside just enough to give Lillian space. That was when Lillian noticed the torn fabric near the back wall. She reached out and picked it up carefully. A piece of a working vest. No name, no unit, just worn straps and dirt ground deep into the seams. Next to it sat untouched food, sealed and clean. Someone had planned this. Lillian felt anger rise, but she pushed it down because anger would not help the pups breathe. She focused instead on the small chest under her fingers, on the faint movement that finally returned, slow and uncertain. When the pup let out a weak sound, Lillian let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. The mother dog lowered herself to the ground then, her body sagging as if she had finally allowed herself to feel how tired she was. She rested her head near Lillian's knee, close enough to touch but not quite touching, like she was waiting to see if this help was real or if it would disappear like everything else. Lillian stayed there longer than she meant to, long enough for the light to shift, long enough for her radio to buzz with a reminder she ignored. She knew she was not supposed to be here. She knew there were rules, but she also knew that walking away now would follow her for the rest of her life. When she finally stood, she did so slowly, meeting the dog's eyes. "I'll come back," she said. "I promise." And as she turned to leave, she did not see the way the dog struggled to her feet again, placing herself between the pups and the empty space where Lillian had been, as if preparing for the moment that promise might be broken. That was the moment everything changed, even though Lillian did not know it yet. Lillian walked back toward the main path, her boots quiet against the dry ground. Every few steps, she stopped and looked over her shoulder, not because she was afraid of being followed, but because she felt something back there pulling her. The image of the dog, her eyes, her silence, her body stretched between her babies and the world, was burned into Lillian's mind. She reached the edge of base and paused before stepping through. She was supposed to check in, drop her gear, and clean up like everyone else after drills. Instead, she sat down on a low crate outside the barracks and just stared at the dust on her pants. Her hands were still shaking. A voice broke through. "You all right?" It was Sergeant June. Older, kind, not nosy, but not blind either. Lillian looked up, nodded, then didn't speak. June sat beside her without asking. They sat in silence for a few minutes before Lillian finally said, "There's a dog out there. Not just a dog. A mother. With 2 puppies." June turned her head. "Alive?" "Barely." June waited. She didn't push. Lillian said, "She's trained. Military. You can tell by how she watches you. Doesn't flinch. Doesn't bark. She just guards. And someone left her there." June's eyes narrowed. "You sure?" There was a vest. Torn. Tags gone. Someone packed food beside her, sealed. Not scattered. It wasn't an accident. June exhaled slowly, like she knew what that meant and didn't like it. "Did you report it?" Lillian shook her head. Didn't have the words. That night, Lillian couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, arms folded under her pillow, trying not to imagine what was happening out there in the dark. Every sound outside felt louder. She remembered the tiny whimper, the way the pup's breath shook, the way the mother dog lay down like she'd made peace with whatever was coming. At first light, Lillian was up. She packed supplies, extra gauze, a bit of jerky from her own stash, her canteen, some tape, a thin cloth she could use to wrap the weaker pup. She didn't write a note or ask permission. She didn't even tell June. She walked fast, her legs remembering every part of the way. When she reached the shed, her heart was already pounding. The mother was still there. The pups were curled close. The weaker one was breathing better now. Still shaky, but stronger. Lillian knelt again. She didn't speak this time, just opened the food slowly and placed it on a flat stone near the dog's front paws. The mother sniffed, didn't move. Lillian unrolled the cloth and reached carefully for the weakest pup. She wrapped it gently and cradled it close to her chest. Her body gave off just enough warmth. "You made it through the night," she whispered. "That's something." The mother dog leaned forward then. Not sudden, not demanding, just enough to place her nose on the cloth for a moment. Then she sat back. "You need a name," Lillian said softly, more to herself than to the dog. "You're not just dog." She thought for a second. "May," she said. "You look like a May." The dog didn't react. "But I think you know that's your name now," Lillian added, half smiling through the tightness in her chest. Over the next few days, Lillian came back every morning. She brought what she could without drawing attention. Sometimes it was a little rice from breakfast. Sometimes an old towel. May never barked. She never begged. She just watched and waited. The pups started moving more. The strong one, she named Button, because it kept crawling onto her boot and chewing at her laces. The smaller one, she named Ash, because on the first day, it had looked like it was fading into the dirt, just a soft shadow. One afternoon, when she was cleaning Ash's paws, she heard footsteps behind her. "You know this isn't your assignment, right?" Lillian looked up. Lieutenant Rossner, young, by the book, never smiled unless someone was watching. "I'm aware," she said. He folded his arms. "That area's restricted for a reason. You're not cleared to patrol there. You're definitely not cleared to carry out unsanctioned rescue." "I didn't carry anything out," she said. "They're still here. That's not the point." Lillian stood up slowly. "What is the point, sir?" Rossner hesitated. Just a second too long. "This isn't a shelter. It's a base. If this animal was deemed unfit, there's a process." "And what's that process?" "Leaving her to die with her babies out in a broken shed." "That's not your call, Reyes." She didn't blink. "No, but leaving her wasn't mine either." He sighed. "You want to put yourself at risk for a dog and 2 puppies? Fine. But if this becomes a reportable violation, you're on your own." She didn't answer. He walked away. That night, she sat with May a little longer than usual. Button had fallen asleep in her lap. Ash was curled close to May's belly. "People think you're just a dog," Lillian said softly. "But I've seen soldiers break down faster than you." May blinked slowly. "You didn't ask for this. You served. You did your part. And they left you." The moonlight stretched long across the ground. Lillian pulled her knees up to her chest and rested her chin there. "I know what that feels like." Lillian didn't know how long she stayed that night. The cold settled in around her knees and hands, but she didn't care. Every time she thought about standing up to leave, something stopped her. Maybe it was the way May kept one eye half open, like she was afraid this was the night Lillian wouldn't come back. Maybe it was Ash, still weaker than Button, but holding on. Maybe it was her own heart, which felt too full and too quiet at the same time. When she finally stood, she moved slowly so she wouldn't wake the pups. She looked down at May and whispered, "Same time tomorrow." May didn't move, but she saw her. Lillian knew it. Back at base, she slipped in and went straight to her bunk. No one said anything. She wasn't sure if that was good or bad. The next morning, she met June outside again. June had a small bag in her hand. "I packed some things," June said. "Just scraps and old towels. Don't ask how I know." Lillian smiled, and her throat tightened. "Thank you." June shrugged. "You didn't ask. I offered." That day, May let Lillian touch her. Not a full pet, not a belly rub. But when Lillian reached to clean a small cut on May's front leg, May didn't pull away. She just sat still, eyes on the pups, like her only concern was making sure they were okay. Lillian cleaned the wound, pressed a clean pad against it, and wrapped it lightly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. A few minutes later, Button climbed onto Lillian's boot again and started chewing her shoelaces like it was a game. Lillian laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd let out in weeks. Then she noticed Ash. The pup was watching her. Not moving much, but alert. Eyes open, tiny ears twitching. "You're getting stronger," Lillian whispered. "You're a fighter." Later that evening, she went to medical supply. She asked for a few basic things, nothing fancy, nothing flagged. A heat pad, antibiotic cream, a small feeding syringe, the kind of items no one would miss. When the supply clerk raised an eyebrow, she said, "It's for a training case. Simulation." He didn't ask more. She went back to the shed in the dark. This time, May walked to her when she arrived. She didn't touch her, but she walked up, close enough to say she noticed. Close enough to say she trusted her, for now. Lillian stayed for over an hour. She kept Ash warm against her chest and helped feed her water through the syringe. Button curled up on her foot and slept there. Then she heard it. A voice. Not from the shed. From beyond the fence. Sergeant Reyes. She turned. Rossner again. Flashlight in hand. He stopped a few feet away. I said not to return. I heard you. Then why are you here? Lillian looked at him, tired. Because they're still alive. And no one else is coming. He walked closer and looked down at the dogs. May growled, not loud but firm. Rossner stepped back. She's trained, Lillian said. You see how she moves? She's not wild. He folded his arms. Even if she is, what are you going to do? Take her home? Raise them on base? You can't keep them. And they're not approved for adoption. Lillian kept her voice steady. Then tell me why she was left here with sealed rations and no ID tags. Who gave that order? Rossner didn't answer. I looked it up, she said. Her serial code was scrubbed. There's no discharge paper. No transfer. She just vanished from the records. Rossner's jaw tensed. Drop this, Reyes. I'm telling you. Let it go. Lillian stared at him. I won't. She stayed quiet the next few days. No more confrontation. Just action. She kept going back. Morning and night. She documented everything. Photos of May's vest, the cut ID strap, the unopened food packet, the cuts on May's legs that showed she tried to dig or escape. She kept the pictures saved on a hidden drive. She didn't trust anyone with them yet. One night, Button started limping. Lillian checked her paw and found a sharp piece of wood stuck between the pads. May watched as Lillian held Button still and removed it. May didn't move, didn't growl, didn't turn away. She just watched, like someone watching a medic care for a teammate. That was the moment Lillian realized something. May recognized her uniform, not as a threat, as a medic, as someone who helps. Back at the barracks, June pulled her aside. You're in deep now, she said gently. Lillian nodded. I know. Is it worth it? They're worth it. June didn't argue. She just said, then be careful. Someone's watching. A week later, she was called to command. An office she had never been in before. Inside was a man in a suit not military. Government. He didn't introduce himself. He showed her a printed image. A photo. May, Button, and her, kneeling beside them, her hand resting on May's back. The photo had been taken from a distance. You know this photo? The man asked. I do. Did you take it? No. Then who did? Lillian didn't blink. No idea. The man leaned forward. You're not authorized to be in that zone. You've broken at least 4 procedural boundaries. You've disobeyed direct orders. Lillian stayed calm. You left her there. She was unfit for further service. She wasn't unfit. She was pregnant. That wasn't the issue. No. Lillian's voice sharpened. Then what was? That she wasn't useful anymore. The man looked annoyed. These animals serve a purpose. When they can't, they're removed from the system. She didn't stop serving. She protected those pups. She never once left them. Even when she was starving. The man sighed. This is over your head, Sergeant. You're emotional. No, she said. I'm human. He dismissed her. But something had already changed. The photo had been seen, shared, and the internet was moving faster than anyone expected. After that meeting, Lillian walked out of the office with her jaw clenched and her hands curled tight at her sides. She didn't say a word to anyone as she passed through the hall. No one made eye contact with her either. That's how it always was when something quiet and wrong had been exposed. Everyone suddenly looked busy. She didn't head back to her bunk. She didn't stop to eat. She went straight to the fence and walked the long path back to the old shed. Every step felt heavier. May was there. So were the pups. Lillian dropped to her knees beside them, the dirt dry under her boots. May pressed her head against Lillian's arm. Not hard, not needy. Just there. Present. Like a quiet way of saying, you came back. Button wobbled toward her, tail shaking. Ash stayed close to May's side, blinking slowly in the sunlight. You're not supposed to exist, Lillian whispered. But here you are. She pulled the small drive from her pocket and held it up. They know now. They're scared. That night, she didn't go back to the barracks. She stayed with them. She curled against the wall, using her jacket as a blanket. May slept near her feet. The pups curled under her arm. At dawn, she heard movement. Not Rossner this time. 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the fence. Doors opened. Men in uniform stepped out. One of them was holding a slip of paper. A formal removal order. June appeared at Lillian's side out of nowhere. You didn't think I was going to let them do this alone, did you? Lillian stood up and faced the men. Her eyes burned, but her voice didn't shake. You're not taking them. The lead officer stepped forward. We have orders. You had orders when you left her here to die too. He didn't respond. June said, these animals aren't abandoned anymore, and you're not dragging them out of here like trash. The officer lifted the paper. We don't need your permission. Lillian stepped forward. You'll need to go through me. May stood up behind her. No growling, just presence. Quiet, steady, unflinching. One of the younger officers hesitated. Sir, maybe we should call this in before we... The lead officer waved him off. But by the time he turned back, something else had arrived. A truck. Not military. Civilian. Camera crews. Microphones. Someone had tipped off the press. The man froze. One cameraman stepped forward. Are these the dogs abandoned at the training base? The story's gone viral. We've got thousands sharing it already. Lillian didn't say a word. She just stood beside May, one hand on her back. The officer lowered the paper. There were too many eyes now. Too many people watching. They left. No apology. No explanation. Just turned and left. 2 days later, May and her pups were officially transferred into Lillian's care. She signed the papers with quiet hands. No speech. No celebration. Just relief. She brought them to a temporary shelter just off base. Not crowded. Safe. Quiet. The pups had space to move now. May had a proper bed. June came by with supplies. Toys. Clean blankets. They're asking questions now, June said, handing Lillian a small bag. Other handlers. Other bases. You started something. Lillian looked over at May, curled up beside the pups. I didn't mean to. You didn't have to. You just did the right thing. At night, Lillian would sit beside May and talk softly. You did everything right, she told her one evening. You stayed. You didn't leave them. Not once. May lifted her head and nudged Lillian's arm. Button came stumbling across the blanket, trying to climb onto her lap. Ash followed slower, steadier, but her legs were getting stronger. You were never broken, Lillian said. You were just left behind. The story made national news. The photo spread across every platform. People cried. People called. Some sent food. Some sent blankets. Some sent handwritten notes saying they served with dogs too and always wondered what happened when the paperwork ran out. Lillian didn't answer every message, but she read them. Every one. She stayed with May and the pups for weeks. Long enough to see Ash finally run without stumbling. Long enough to see Button learn how to bark for real. And May? She stopped watching the door. She slept with her eyes fully closed. Because she knew. She was home. Lillian never planned to become someone people followed online. She wasn't interested in going viral. But after that photo of her with May and the pups hit the internet, something shifted. Not just out there in the world, but inside her. Every time she opened her messages, there were hundreds of notes. Veterans, dog handlers, even people she didn't know from small towns across the country. They wrote things like, "Thank you for not walking away. My dad served with a K9. We never knew what happened to the dog after he came home. I cried watching May lie beside you. It reminded me of my mom. It was overwhelming. But it was also a reminder, what happened in that shed hadn't just broken rules. It had broken something bigger. Lillian didn't want attention. She just wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. May was gaining weight. Her coat was healthier now. Ash and Button played more, fought over toys, and sometimes curled up under the same blanket like they never remembered how close they'd come to not making it. Lillian started taking them on walks, short ones. Not around the base, but out near the fields beyond the shelter. May didn't like leashes at first, but she never ran. She stayed close, always glancing back to check on the pups. Even with her strength returning, that habit never left her. One afternoon, as they were walking, Lillian noticed a man standing near the fence. He was older, wore a ball cap low over his eyes. He didn't approach, just watched. Lillian didn't speak at first. May stood still beside her, alert, not nervous, just aware. Finally, the man said, "That's her, isn't it?" Lillian stepped closer. "Do I know you?" He nodded slowly. "Name's Glenn. I worked logistics on base years ago. Before retirement. I saw her in training once. K9 Batch 14B. Lillian's throat tightened. "Then you knew what they did." "I didn't know this." His voice cracked a little. "We didn't always get told where they went. Sometimes they just disappeared from the records. We stopped asking questions after a while." She looked at him. "You shouldn't have." He lowered his head. "I know that now." Then he pulled something from his pocket. A photo. It was old, worn at the edges. It showed May standing beside a young male handler, both of them looking straight at the camera. Glenn said, "Her name back then was Echo." Lillian held the photo for a long time. She knelt beside May and held it where the dog could see. May sniffed the image, then sat down slowly beside her. "I think Echo still remembers," Glenn said. Lillian nodded. "I think so too." The shelter offered to start the adoption paperwork. Officially, May and the pups could live with Lillian full-time. But she paused. Not because she didn't want them. She did. She already loved them. But she knew this wasn't just about giving them a home. It was about giving them their story. So she waited. She worked with a quiet team behind the scenes. A group of retired handlers and military dog trainers. They started building something. A record. A timeline. A space where every lost K9 could be traced. One of the first names on the list? Echo. 3 months after the photo went viral, Lillian received a letter. It was handwritten. Inside was a copy of a discharge document. Official this time. It listed Echo as retired, released into compassionate care. No longer decommissioned. No longer erased. Lillian framed it. She hung it above May's bed. That night, as May lay beside her pups, now a little bigger, a little louder, full of life, Lillian rested her hand on May's back. "You're not lost anymore," she whispered. "You're not a number. You're not forgotten." Later that week, Lillian sat with June at a small cafe near the shelter. "They're going to start naming names soon," June said quietly. "Command can't ignore this anymore. They shouldn't." June looked at her. "You ready for that kind of attention?" Lillian sipped her drink. "Not even a little. But May deserves it. They all do." June smiled. "You really didn't plan on changing things, did you?" "No," Lillian said. "But I didn't plan on walking past her either." The next morning, the shelter received a letter from a family in Oregon. The man who wrote it said he had served with Echo. Said she was the only reason he came home from Afghanistan. Said he never stopped thinking about her. Lillian called him. They spoke for over an hour. He cried. So did she. He asked if he could come visit. She said yes. When he arrived, May didn't recognize him at first. She stood back, protective. The pups ran to Lillian's side. But when the man knelt down, pulled out an old whistle and gave one soft blow, May froze. Then she stepped forward. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just slow, like something inside her was waking up. She sniffed his hand, then leaned against him. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I never stopped looking," he whispered. May didn't move. She didn't need to. The man didn't take her home. He said she had already found hers. But he came back every month to visit. Sometimes he brought his own kids. One of them sat beside Ash and said, "She's my favorite." Button stole his hat and ran off with it. Everyone laughed. Even May. Or at least it looked like she smiled. 6 months after that, Lillian stood on a small stage with May sitting beside her. She didn't want to speak. She never liked crowds. But she did it for echo. She read one sentence. That's all. When we leave no one behind, we don't just save them. They save us too. The crowd stood in silence. Then they clapped. But Lillian didn't look at them. She looked down at May, resting her head on Button's back, both pups asleep under her legs. She reached down and ran her hand gently along May's neck. "Good girl," she whispered. "You made it." May lived another 4 years. She passed away on a quiet spring afternoon, with Ash and Button curled against her, and Lillian holding her paw. She was not alone. She was not abandoned. And her story changed everything. Thank you to my amazing family for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, I just know you'll love what comes next. I've prepared something even more exciting and surprising that I can't wait to share with you. Just click on the end card appearing on your screen right now to watch the next one.